Well, time for another update on our Ford 302 rebuild. You can probably tell the block is back and has been redone. I've got it bored over 20 thousandths. Bores look good. I'm going to blueprint the engine starting today, so I'll know more about their dimension. They look to be about 1,000th over. Not a train wreck, but not preferred with hyper-eutectic pistons, but we'll do okay with it, I guess. Anyway, block's pretty clean. A couple things. See, I reworked the head studs, the head bolt holes. I've got a set of ARP head studs that I'm going to put in it, so I just gave them a quick freshen up on the threads with the tap, just to make sure that everything goes back together real well. And that worked out. A few other things we got going here. Let me roll the block. New oil plugs all the way around the block. Also got oil plugs for the heads when they're back. I guess just on the heads and the pistons, I've got new ARP rod studs, rod bolts for the pistons, and so I'm getting those reworked, which basically means they've got to pull the studs that are in there, press them out, and I'm having them shave the parting surfaces, and then they're pressing in new ones, and they're going to rehone the bore on the end of the rod where it meets the crank to make sure it's nice and true. My take from what I can read is stock rods are pretty decent up to 375 horsepower or so, but they do occasionally break bolts, so we went with the ARP high strength bolts, and that's what we're working those now. The heads are also still out, being reworked. New Manley valves, the valve springs that previously purchased double valve springs, locks, and spring caps, and they're porting and polishing. They're doing what they're called a stage 2 port and polish, and then all the machine work to support the new springs. So that's all still being done. Hopefully get those back early next week. Pistons early next week, or maybe even late today. We'll see. One thing also that I'm doing right now, or I've done, I guess, is I was dry fitting the new windage plate, windage tray, oil pump, oil pickup tube. This particular windage tray is specified for a, it says right there, for a 302 rear sump louvered windage tray by Canton Products. Talked about that earlier. And so it's supposed to work with this application. It's a little bit snug right here. This is the support for the old pickup tube. It goes underneath the windage tray there through that gap. But made it work. It's okay. It's in there. The oil pump's on. And it's not mounted permanently. This is just a dry fit, so there's no gaskets or sealing materials in there. And but it's going to work. We do have one interference issue. Let me show you real quickly. Here is the stock dipstick. Dipstick for the rear sump fits through this hole, and you put in the stock dipstick. I'm not going all the way in, but what happens is the dipstick goes up under the windage tray, and it doesn't come out. It'll actually enter the sump of the oil pan. That's a problem. So this particular one, if you put it all the way, if I were to push it all the way in, there's no real way to get it to come back like so, which is what you would need to do. Luckily, the dipstick that I bought for this motor actually does have, let's see, has the same challenge, but you'll notice that there's a significant length of tubing that goes into the oil pan area. Get that up in there a little bit. It goes up into the oil pan area. So my intention is that I'll take a set of tubing benders and try to just put enough curl on the end of the dipstick such that the dipstick will actually pass outside of the windage tray. So I think that's doable. Should be. Just get my tubing benders out. Get my tubing benders out when the time comes. So much for that nice chrome covering on my new chrome dipstick. Anyway, be all right. And then let's see, one or two other things. Here's something else that I worked on. If you know much about these particular motors as they were built, like this is a 99 5-liter Ford motor. The where the oil filter goes on a stock, what I call stock standard old school motor, actually it had this little fitting inside there, and then there's a piece of aluminum that bolts on here and moves front of the engine so that you can screw your oil filter on this direction. So had to get rid of that because I wanted to go with the stock look on the oil filter. In order to do that, you have to purchase an oil filter adapter. That oil filter adapter is now screwed in to the block. I've installed it. A little tricky. If you, there's a hex head here in the end. I don't have anything nearly that big. Went to my local hardware, my local auto store, parts store, and they didn't have anything nearly that big. So I ended up having to kind of build a weird little tool. But this is a bolt, old bolt, and I had to shave the head on this hex here, such that it would fit down inside, and then used a wrench basically to just screw it on. Now I couldn't take it back off that way unless I got a second nut to deadlock this nut. But anyway, good enough to get it on. Put a little bit of Loctite on it because I want the filter to come off, not the insert to come out. So if you have that little challenge, I think this came off the motor mount on this motor originally. It was in my stack of parts that take it off, and so made use of it that way. And then another part that I recovered off the old block and turned into something of a tool was, I didn't really look here. Here's the oil pump, and here you'll see is the oil pump drive shaft that runs off of the distributor. And one thing I intend to do as I get this thing together is to prime the oil pump, of course. And don't have an oil pump priming tool. They actually make a tool that you can purchase. It's hard to see, but down inside the distributor hole, there's another hole down inside, and that's where your hex for your drive shaft comes through. I took the old, it's actually a camshaft position sensor, what we would have previously considered the distributor, but it's just a camshaft position sensor in modern motors. I took the shaft out of that thing and had a round end on it here with a little tang that stood up, and that tang passed through the camshaft position sensor and gave it a location. And what I did was I went ahead and ground out a hex head pattern that fits a 5/8 socket. And so whenever it's time to prime the oil pump, this little guy will go inside. Let's see if I can get a picture here. Makes sense. This little guy will go down inside into the hole in the bottom, and then made up with that hex-headed shaft, and then we'll be able to just use a hand drill and put a 5/8 socket on it, and we'll be able to run the prime up on that oil pump counterclockwise. I'll be able to run the prime up on that oil pump. So got that ready to go anyway, and we'll use that whenever the time comes. So now I have a 302 oil pump priming tool. So just think about, if you can, recover that, if you use a motor like this, just recover that old camshaft position sensor. It's not easy to get the gear off the end. There's a cam gear that rides here, but they take a couple of it takes a drift pin, but you can get these two roll pins out, and then beat the stuffings out of it, and it'll ultimately come out of there, which is what I did. At that point, I wasn't too worried about hurting it. Wasn't going to reuse it otherwise. So anyway, that's ready to go. And so from here, pretty happy with the dry fit on the windage tray. Now, one thing, understand this is not a final fit on the windage tray. The windage tray, I need to refit it once the crank's in place and make sure that there's no interference between the crank, the rods, anything, and that plate. But for now, at least, the fitting of the oil pickup tube and the oil pump and those kind of things. I'm happy with that. That was really kind of my goal, was just to make sure I could get those things to work. Now, real quick, if you're going to use one of these type of windage trays, what you ultimately do, I mean, these are your stock bolts for the mains on the 302, on the 2-bolt main, 302. And what you do is on numbers, here's a number 1, the number 1 main block here. Where's that? There it is, main block here. Number 2 main block, and then number 3, 4, and 5. Numbers 2 and 4, you replace the main bolts, and you replace them with a stud. Here's the original main bolts that were in there, and you just replace them with these. They look like ARP, but they're sold by Canton, probably made by ARP. But you replace that with this stud, and then you'll have a nut on top of the. See if you can see it here. There's a nut. I don't know if you can see it. But anyway, there's a nut down there on the holding the main on, and then the windage tray sits on top of that, and then you have a lock nut that you can kind of see right in there that holds the windage plate on. So there you go. We'll check the clearance again once we get the crank and the pistons installed, but I'm reasonably confident that that clearance won't be a problem. I was much more concerned about clearance on the oil system, make sure that you know how these things fit together and all those goodies. So anyway, that's where we're at. We're going to move forward and take this stuff back off, the oil pump and the oil pickup tube and the oil pump drive shaft, get that stuff out of there. And then we're going to start blueprinting the motor. Blueprinting the motor is not anything like it sounds. We're not going to make a single drawing. It's just about measuring all the clearances. We're going to measure, take 6 measurements on each bore. We're going to measure all of the bearing clearances, everything, and document it. In this case, we'll put it in an Excel spreadsheet and have it. We'll also be able to then calculate what our clearances are on our main bearings and camshaft bearings. And still going to use, I think I'm still going to use the plastic gauge to confirm measurements, but you know, measure twice, cut once kind of a thing. We want to get this thing as right as we can. So blueprinting's next, getting the pistons and heads back. That's critical steps. And then once we get it blueprinting, get those parts back, then off we go. We're going to start putting this thing together. Anyway, I'll talk to you again in the next video. Have a good day. Bye.